Story time about how my boyfriend's best friend tried to ruin our relationship. So a little background information. My boyfriend used to be best friends with this one girl. We're gonna call her Jamie. Well, Jamie and my boyfriend were best friends for years, and their friendship was more flirty than anything. Well, him and I got to know each other during track season, so we were always hanging out after school, and sometimes Jamie would be there too. Well, the one night him and I were on FaceTime and we were talking about how we really liked each other. So the next day we started dating, and I was good friends with Jamie too. Then after we started dating, she started acting really weird towards me. Like, I would try to say hi whenever I saw her in the hallways, and she would just give me a dirty ass look. So then I told my boyfriend how I thought that she was really mad at me, and he said that he would talk to her. Well, a week before him and I started dating, she told us that there was this guy that she really wanted to ask to prom, and she said that she liked him for a while. Well, then my boyfriend said, apparently a few days ago you were hitting on the boy that she was going to ask to prom. So then I started to connect the dots, and I was like, oh shit, like for part 2. Part 2 of how I was sexually harassed twice while working at Walmart. Something I forgot to mention in the first part, I reported Terry several times and they still did nothing about it. So like I said, then I met this kid Jordan, him and I started getting close, and work actually started to become fun. Well, finally after a month, we decided that we were going to go out to lunch during work. So the day that we went out to lunch, he kept telling me that he needed to tell me something. But he was like beating around the bush the whole time. Like for some reason, he just couldn't get out what he wanted to tell me. But then he kept trying to change the subject like he wasn't the one who brought it up in the first place. I should have took that as a red flag before we went to lunch, but I didn't. So he keeps going on about it in the car, right? And then he's like, I'm not really 20, I'm 25 turning 26. So then for some reason after that, whenever he saw my mood change, this guy has the audacity to start touching my legs, fucking rubbing my inner thigh and shit. I kept telling him to stop. I was like, what the fuck are you doing? So then I told him I'm getting out of the car. And he says, I'm not going to let you, like for part 3. Part 3 of how I got sexually harassed twice while working at Walmart. So like I said, he wouldn't let me out of the car, but then we got back to work. And then he had the audacity to keep asking if I was okay when he literally just sexually harassed me in the car. So I went to the bathroom, literally had a whole fucking mental breakdown. I called my mom to come get me because I was not finna stay there. So the next time that I went back to work, I grabbed my stuff and I gave it to one of the workers to go and give to a manager and tell them that I was quitting. Well, one of the managers caught me walking out the back door and she was like, what's wrong? So I immediately broke down. I started telling her what was going on. And then a crowd of people came around us being nosy as fuck, listening to what I was saying. And she was like, you're not quitting. I'm going to take care of this. So she sent me home and she said that she would call me whenever it was taken care of. So 2 days goes past. I'm like, why the fuck hasn't she called? So then I call and I found out that she fired me. So I reported everything to Walmart ethic team and they just closed my case. They basically didn't do shit about it. Oh, and Jordan wasn't really a manager. He was a supervisor. Should I try to take this to court? Story time. My dad got my half-brother's girlfriend pregnant. A little background information. This all happened a few years ago. Anyways, my brother was fresh out of high school and he had been dating this girl named Serena for 2 years. And my dad, for some reason, hated her. At least that's what we thought. Well, my brother didn't have a license at the time, so every time that she came over, she needed somebody to drop her off at home. So my dad would always offer to drop her off at home, even though he literally hated her. And he could have just ordered her an Uber. Which is what he did with all of my friends. Well, the one night her parents called and they were like, hey, like, is Serena still there? She hasn't came home yet. And my dad said that he was dropping her off. So I called my dad and he said that they ran out of gas on the side of the road. So that was just like one incident. Well, the next morning my mom goes to get in the car for work and she finds a thong in the car. So she brings it in the house and she asks me, hey, is this yours? Meanwhile, I had never seen them before. So then she goes and asks my half-brother and my dad's whose they are, like for part 2. Extremely toxic best friend story time. So when I was in 8th grade, there was this boy. And this boy would go around telling almost every girl that he liked her. And I was one of those girls. And he would do stuff with all of us. And there were like 11 of us. So we all hated each other. Especially this one girl, and we're gonna call her Abby. And every time we saw each other, we would be super mean to each other. Well, a year passed, we stopped talking to this kid, and I bumped into her at homecoming and basically apologized. So after that, we became best friends. And everything was good until every time I told her about a guy, she would start talking to them. Like this one boy that I was Snapchatting and talking to, she accidentally sent nudes to him and said, oh, sorry, I meant to send them to my boyfriend. So then she called one of my other best friends and said, no, it actually wasn't an accident. And of course he told me because he was my best friend. So I was like, whatever, and stopped talking to the boy. And she did it again, like for part 2. Extremely toxic best friend part 2. So pretty much her excuse for that was, oh, well, he said that he was gonna leak my nudes if I didn't send him them again. Which was a lie because literally half the school already had her nudes. So then I started talking to this other boy, and he lived like right down the street from her. So she was like, if you want to go to his house, you can. And I was like, are you sure? And she said, yeah, just go tell my mom. And I was like, oh, okay. So I went and told her mom where I was going and went over his house. So I walked back to her house and she literally locked me out. Like her mom had to come open the door for me to let me in. And she was like, oh, it's a good thing you came back when you did, because I was going to drive you home now and tell your dad everything that you did. And she goes, I don't think you guys should be together because you're unexperienced. And she would always tell me how he flirts with her all the time. So after our friendship ended, she goes, I just felt like it was always a competition between me and you. Story time about how I hooked up with a guy in my science teacher's closet. So my whole grade went on this field trip, and everybody was dressing super nice, wearing a dress. And I wore a dress that day, even though I was more of a leggings and t-shirt kind of gal. And I wore spandex under because I hated not being able to move around. Well, after our field trip, everybody's jumping around on the bus, I don't care what I'm doing because I have shorts on under my dress. And after school that day, I get a text from one of the popular boys. And he goes, I'm really physically attracted to you. And I was like, oh, same, like, period. And he was like, wanna hook up tomorrow? And I was like, during school? He goes, yeah, I have a place where we can hook up. And I wasn't really experienced with boys. So I was like, fuck it, if I'm gonna experiment, it's gonna be with you. Cause he was really hot. So the next day I meet him during lunch, and he takes me to this one spot, but we couldn't hook up there because it wasn't blocked off like it usually is. So we go to my science teacher's room, and right after we hook up, our science teacher walks in. Storytime, I got my boyfriend back for cheating on me by getting him arrested. It was the summer before my sophomore year in high school, and my sister just got accepted to a college that was 25 minutes away from our house. So I would always hang out with her and her friends and go to parties with them. Well, there was this one guy in her friend group that I really liked, and he was 22, and he also had a girlfriend. But did that stop me? No, because he was really hot. And because we would hang out all the time, him and I were getting super close. We would FaceTime each other all the time. We would hang out even when we weren't with my sister and her friends. Well, the one night I'm sitting at home and I get a call from him. And he's like, my girlfriend and I broke up. I really need someone to talk to. And I'm like, aw, you can come over. I'll comfort you. So he comes over and I comfort him, and then we do the nasty. And the next morning I had to sneak him out my window because my parents would have flipped shit. So him and I start dating after that. And then Halloween weekend comes up. And I go to a party with my sister and our friend group. Like for part 2. Storytime about how I found out that my mom fucked my boyfriend. So a little background information. My mom had me whenever she was 15. So we were always super close because we were so close in age. Well, during my senior year of high school, I started dating this guy. I was 18, he was 20. Well, after dating for a little bit, it was time for me to go off to college. And we didn't want to do long distance, so we kind of just cut it off. And instead of going to college, he just wanted to work, so he stayed in my hometown. And he was pretty close with my mom, too, because during my school year, he got kicked out of his parents' house and came and stayed with us for like a month. And we're going to call him Bryce. Well, I get a text from my mother the one day, and she's like, hey, honey, Bryce wants to know if he can come stay here. His parents kicked him out again. And I was like, no, that's weird. Like, we're not even dating. What the fuck? And her response was, well, honey, I'm a good person, so I'm not going to listen to what you say on this one. He's going to come stay with us. And I wasn't even living there at the time, and she was going to let him stay there, like for part 2. Storytime about the guy who was obsessed with me. We're going to call him Ryan. Well, Ryan had a crush on me for a long time. And one night, one of our friends asked me to go to a party with them. And Ryan was going to be the DD. And everything was good. We were all having a great time at the party. Well, Ryan and I went off to one of the bathrooms. And we started making out. And while we're making out, he goes, I really want to fuck you, but I can't. And I'm just like, why? And he said it was because he couldn't get it up. And obviously he was embarrassed about it, which is understandable. So I left the bathroom and didn't plan on telling anybody about it. Until I walk over to a group of my guy friends, and they're telling me that apparently Ryan told everybody that we fucked. So at that point, I didn't give a fuck, and I told them what actually happened, aka that he couldn't get hard. And apparently he was mad at me after that, but I had no idea. So he said, do you still want me to take you home? So I said, yeah. And now that he drove me home, he knew where I lived. And then I got a text from one of his friends, like for part 2. Storytime about the boy across the street who used to stalk me. So a little background information. My parents and I moved into a new house that was literally 5 minutes from where I used to live. but I went to private school, and almost all the other kids in my town went to the public school, so I didn't really know a lot of the kids in my town. Well, a week after we moved in, our neighbors across the street invited us to a barbecue. While we were there, I started talking to our neighbor's older son, and him and I started to get along really well, like in a flirty way. Their older son was a senior, I was a sophomore, and their younger son was a freshman. Well, I kind of talked to the younger son, but he was just like giving me really weird vibes. So for the next few weeks, I started hanging out with their older son a lot, and we would talk all the time. Well, the one day whenever I went over their house, it was super weird. His younger brother kept saying, "Oh, I think I know you from somewhere. Like, I swear I know you." And I'm just like, okay. Well, the one morning I was waiting outside for my mom to pick me up because she worked night shifts and she would just grab me and then take me to my school. And I saw him in his window watching me like for part 2. Story time about the girl who found out that I was hooking up with her boyfriend for 3 months straight. So a little background information. I was in high school and there was this boy that I really liked. And I had a crush on him since I was in like 7th grade. And the only time he would talk to me is whenever he wanted me to send him nudes. Well, in high school he got a girlfriend. But while he was dating her, he would still ask me for nudes. And of course, I would still send them.